Hi, welcome to the Best Life, Best Death podcast. I'm Diane Hullett, and today I continue my exploration of body disposition. And joining me today is Emily Nelson of Be a Tree. Hi, Emily.
Hi there. Thanks for having me, Diane.
I'm so excited. So Be a Tree Cremation is an organization in Denver, and Emily is the founder and CEO. And today I've asked her to just particularly focus on aquamation, which is something that her group specializes in. So tell us, how did you get started in this career?
Yes, I think, part calling and really part just recognizing the need for it. I started working in the death care space several years ago at the corporate level. I worked for a large corporation that owns thousands across the country. And that allowed me to see behind the curtain of something that, I've always been really drawn to death from a more like esoteric kind of way, but never really considered the practical side, as many of us don't. And so when I saw behind the curtain and realized, number one, how kind of disconnected it is from our families, and number two, realize the environmental impact of the death care industry, I really started developing just this gut feeling that grew and grew over time, that there had to be a better way for us to be more connected to nature and for the experience to just be more intimate and more modern than what's available today. So
Wow,
that led me here.
that's so cool. Were you working in like funeral homes or in cremation specifically, or what was the?
All of it. I actually worked at the corporate office, and they did every kind of disposition, well, traditional disposition, burial, cremation across the country. So I was responsible for a lot of the marketing efforts, and was able to travel around and see all kinds of different operations in my time there.
Wow. And then you just, as you said, once you sort of saw behind the curtain, you were like, wait a minute, I wonder if there are other ways. And so
Mhm.
how did that shift happen for you?
Yeah, and a big part of it was a simple conversation that I had with my mom. She adopted me when I was about 5 years old, and we're really close. And so, working in the industry, we had started talking about this stuff, which we had never talked about before. I think so many families don't. And so that opened up the door for us to just talk about what would she want when the time comes. And, I kind of told her about some of the more natural options that I had heard of. And she said, well, I think I really want to be a tree. And I said, okay, well, so do you want to do just a natural burial then, and we can make sure that, we plant flowers and trees near you. And she said, oh, no, I want to be cremated. I don't want all the worms to get me. And so that was kind of this aha moment of realizing that, we have been pretty quickly shifting as a society towards preferring cremation because of the simplicity and the cost, and the fact that we're more nomadic than we used to be, and we need the remains to be more transportable, and yet the cremation options available are just not environmentally friendly and not connected to nature in a way that is meaningful. And so that was that moment where I realized that we needed something that offered an environmental benefit and also had the simplicity of cremation. So that's really what led me to water cremation. And at the time that I discovered it, I realized that here in Colorado it had been legal since 2011, and yet there really wasn't anyone offering it. And so that was really when I saw that opening and a need to take action. And that's kind of what led me to Be a Tree.
Amazing, amazing. So is water cremation, or aquamation, as some people call it, is it legal in every state?
Not yet,
Oh,
no. It
interesting.
is
So
all
not legal everywhere and not available everywhere. And
correct.
yet it's definitely something people are hearing about and talking about.
Yes, absolutely. I think, as we just become more mindful of death in general, and we're also becoming more mindful of our environmental impact as humans, I think that's just creating an environment where folks are more open and aware to wanting these different options. And, even just media around things like natural organic reduction or human composting is still starting that conversation about having environmentally aware methods available. But it is, currently legal in about 19 states, and some others are considering it. And even in some states where it's available, like kind of like I found here in Colorado, just because it's legal doesn't mean that there are providers actively offering it in different areas for people.
Interesting. What tell us more about what is it? How does it work? I mean, scientifically, what happens?
Sure. Yeah, it is. It's very sort of sciency if you look at it.
Science
Um,
fiction.
yeah, yeah, it does feel like that. So instead of fire, we're going to use water to break down the body. So water and about 5% alkali, which is something that's used to make soaps and in many of our household goods. And when the water and alkali combine, it creates a chemical reaction that essentially mimics the natural decomposition process over a number of hours. So in our case, it takes about 18 hours at a much lower temperature, but the temperature can range based on different systems. Ours is about 199 degrees. Others can get a little hotter and are
Okay.
faster.
So kind of a warm
But
and some kind of I'm picturing some kind of a vessel or tube or something.
exactly. Yeah, it's kind of a metal vessel. It's kind of like a big metal womb or something where it's sealed and the water gently circulates throughout that whole time. So at the end of the process, we have two components. We have water that is a really nutrient rich liquid, and it's completely sterile at that point. There's no human DNA in it anymore, because of that chemical process. It's really broken down to our most basic components that our bodies are made of. So that kind of goes off and drains into a holding tank. And then you have skeletal remains. So most people that don't realize that even with a fire cremation, a vast majority of the ashes you're getting returned are bones. So the ashes or the cremated remains that we're familiar with are still returned to the family with this process. We have skeletal remains that in our case we air dry them for 1 or 2 days, and then they get processed or essentially pulverized and placed into an urn. So you still have those that you can go scatter, or we have special urns that you can plant a memorial tree with. You can bury them in a cemetery. You're really not limited to what the final resting place for that component is.
You essentially end up with the same type of like a pulverized, like you said, kind of like an ashy remains.
Mhm.
I've heard that the aquamation is more of a whiter remains rather than so gray or
It
black.
is.
But that is an interesting component that you still have this ability to, as you said, have a mobile thing that you can take with you or place in different places. Kind of a similar resting place of the cremation ashes. What do people do with the liquid? How is that handled?
Yeah, so in our case, we're a little unique in that we actually return it all to the earth. So we partner with a local farm. It's called Half Moon Farm in Lakewood, Colorado here, and we are using it to grow mostly fresh cut flowers. So they're nourishing their land with it on several non-edible plants. And then the families are always invited to take an amount with them as well that they can use in their own gardens or even on their house plants. So we offer bottles of that for the family, which they get diluted before use on plants, and they can use that as another way to memorialize their loved one. And a vast majority of the families we work with at least take one bottle of that, if not more.
That is fascinating. So you end up with sort of the bone component and also this water component. What
Mhm.
do people typically like? Are you finding, do people plan ahead for this? Is this the request of the person who died, or is this something families are just calling and saying, "Someone died. What do we do? What do you have to offer?"
Sure. Yeah, I would say that obviously, like so many other people in the death care space, we're trying to change that narrative and allow people to have conversations and plan ahead. However, a vast majority of the families we work with are more when the need arises. So in a lot of cases, there's usually no documentation or money in place that had been pre-arranged for the service, and they're going based on either, in a good scenario, they will have at least had a conversation with their loved one and know that this is what they wanted, or in some cases they're just having to know how they lived their life and what their values were, and you know, kind of make their best guess as to what their best option is for body care. So yeah, vast majority of people don't plan, and we just want to change that narrative and allow people to have a way to plan.
Why do you think it makes a difference to plan?
Yeah, in so many ways. I mean, um, on a higher level that I think a lot of people don't even think about is that kind of psychological burden. We find that when people plan ahead and know what they want and know that it's documented somewhere, sort of this big weight off your shoulders. Like, whew, like I didn't even know that I was carrying that weight. And now I feel like it's gone and I can live my life more fully. So that's a huge, huge part. And then, of course, on a more practical level, you want to make sure that the people who are going to be around to grieve your loss aren't always burdened with these decisions and having to guess what you would have wanted. Can be just such a huge gift to them not to have to make all of those decisions in a time of emotional stress, and allow them to really focus on remembering you, taking care of themselves, rather than having to figure out all these logistics around what to do from a practical standpoint.
Right? That makes so much sense. How many people work at Be a Tree?
Yeah, we're a growing team. We're still quite a small company. We have a team of 5 folks right now. So 5 people who are doing everything from pre-planning to arranging with families and all the way to caring for people's loved ones and running our water cremation process.
Amazing. And you have just one machine right now.
Yes.
True. And there's a couple other places, I think, in the Front Range of Colorado doing this, but not a lot.
Yeah, it's still not a widespread option. So we're so blessed to be able to work with these families.
Yeah. Do you know, is it becoming more widespread in other places? I mean, I know it was so amazing when Desmond Tutu chose this option.
Mhm.
That really put it on the radar in terms of media in some way. Is it common in South Africa, or was that kind of a surprise choice for him?
No, I mean it's not for humans, it's not common really anywhere yet. I would still say it's emerging. We don't even have really great data available on the number of people who are choosing it, because in many states like here in Colorado, it's still considered a type of cremation.
Oh,
So even
interesting.
those
So it's just
statistics like show,
right.
yeah, just burial or cremation, and we don't know what portion of that is water.
Oh, that's so interesting. So that'll be interesting when they start to collect more of that. What is the history of it? I think I've read that it started with large animals, right? How to dispose of large farm animals.
Yeah, it's actually so interesting. Most people are really shocked to learn that it was invented in 1888.
Wow.
So there's a name named Amos Herbert Hobson. He created this process as a solution to taking care of the bodies of diseased cattle and livestock, because you don't really want to burn a bunch of carcasses on your property and who have these diseases. Whereas with this process, he found that they could safely get rid of the animal carcasses and take the resulting like remains and put it back on their land in a nourishing way. And so it was really a great solution for that.
That's
Um,
so fascinating. And yet more than 100 years later, and it's just starting to kind of be a process that humans can use.
Exactly. Yeah, it took some time for us to evolve in that way, but even in the veterinary space, it's been really common, and I think a lot of people may not even know that their animal may have been cared for with water cremation. And because since you still get the remains back in such a similar way, it's not always known that that's happening. And it's been much more widely adopted in the animal space. And then slowly, starting with medical institutions like the Mayo Clinic and UCLA and the University of Florida, they were able to introduce this as a way to take care of bodies after they were donated for science and for other donation purposes. And they found it to be so appealing because they could have it right down the hall, instead of having to transport offsite because of the smoke with a traditional cremation. So
Right. Just
very clinical, clean kind of process in that way.
so interesting. Thank you. This is such good information. I think my listeners are going to be really interested. How does it compare cost wise to other, either to cremation or burial?
Yeah, I think let's talk about cost wise and then talk about environmental wise, because we haven't even touched on environmental
Sure.
impact yet. From a cost standpoint, we find that in death care, it's kind of like healthcare where there's just so much variation
Yeah.
and what things can cost, but can give you some averages. A traditional burial in the US, the last kind of numbers that I've seen are between $7,000 to $10,000 for a traditional burial, just because of the casket and often embalming and everything that goes into it. And then a cremation really can range. You can get what they call a direct cremation, where you're really getting kind of the bare bones services, no pun intended, just paperwork, and then kind of getting your loved one returned in a plastic box on your doorstep. That can range in most states. You can get that for $1,000 or so. And then a full service cremation through a more traditional avenue like a funeral home is really going to be somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000. Again, just varying so much on location by location. So our process, our packages start at $2,450, and that includes the transportation to us, the water cremation itself, and plus all the filing of the paperwork and a basic urn. So we try to really make that really transparent and all inclusive and comparable to what you could pay for a fire cremation, because we just don't want cost to be a factor that would deter someone away from choosing this.
So cool. And what kind of yeah, what is it that I want to ask? I guess I want to say, I'll edit my rambling there. What kind of people do you find choose this?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And going into this, I was thinking, like, there's not that much market research available. So, just going on faith that that it's going to be in demand. The I was thinking maybe we would get more folks who were, very like hippie, liberal types who really were mindful of the environment through their entire life. And of course, we do get a lot of people like that. And though I've been surprised by the wide spectrum of folks, we get people who are motivated by the environment, of course, but we also get people who are maybe had a phobia of fire or a phobia of burial, and water just sounds like a much more gentle option for them. We also just get people who were gardeners or nature lovers, and they feel more connected to this because of their love for one of those things. So it encompasses a lot more than that. And we get people from veterans to unfortunately, young folks who were more progressive and knew about this and wanted it. So it really does run the gamut, and I can't like pigeonhole the type of person who chooses it.
So great. Well, I'm just curious when I look out, I think, will this, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, will this be kind of equal to cremation? I mean, who knows? It's so interesting. And I'm so excited that Be a Tree has kind of, put a stake in the ground to not to use a metaphor, to say that, you want to build this in the Front Range of Colorado. I think it's so neat, Emily.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what the adoption is like. And, I think a lot of it depends on, as a society and government, where we go to, because if there are more strict regulations put in place that prohibit, emissions and impacts, then we may see the adoption grow more quickly, because, we've talked about it being more environmentally friendly, but why does it need to be? And I think that's important to touch on is, with traditional burial, we're using a lot of wood, so it's contributing to deforestation in order to manufacture the number of caskets that are needed. We're also burying so much steel and concrete on an annual basis. Heard the statistic that we bury enough steel to build the Golden Gate Bridge every year underground. And then we're also using cancerous embalming fluids in many cases. So people think that fire cremation is the more environmentally sound option, but if you look at that, it's also really resource intensive. We're burning fossil fuels and creating smoke emissions that are toxic as well. It's a Every flame cremation is about the equivalent of driving 600 miles in a standard passenger vehicle. So that impact is not insignificant. And water cremation can eliminate up to 90% of the carbon footprint and energy that goes into a fire cremation.
Great statistics. I love it. So concrete. I think it's interesting too how sometimes these bigger events impact society's kind of adoption of these new things. And I was speaking with an author whose name is Shannon Lee Dottie, and she wrote a book called American Afterlives. And one of the things she noted that is out there is that after 9/11, cremation increased. And I'm not sure they really know why. They just know that statistically, after this big event in US society, and it impacted the world too, that cremation in the US rose. So I think, well, I wonder what other, events might occur that kind of cause
Yeah,
us to rethink our body disposition as a society. Who knows?
yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah. Well, thank you tons for your time, Emily. I just think you're a wealth of information, and it's so fun to see, somebody embracing these kind of new paths in death care at a young age. You're at the vanguard.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's really exciting. At the end of the day, we just kind of want to pass on that message that, we're part of nature too, and we want to give people a comfortable choice that feels in alignment with their values in a way that they can also live on through nature and feel good about the way that their body is being treated at the end of their life.
Well, thanks so much. You can find out more about Emily Nelson, founder and CEO, at beatree.life, Life. Thanks again, Emily.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Best Life, Best Death podcast with Diane Hullett and my guest, Emily Nelson. Thanks so much. And you can find out more about my work on my website, bestlifebestdeath.com. Thanks so much.